Today is Monday, October 16th, and we're going to go around the bases with our MLB insider at the New York Post. He is none other than Jon Heyman. Jon, how you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you, Ryan?
I'm doing well, and obviously we're now in the ALCS and NLCS. Last night, the Rangers took Game 1 against the Astros in the ALCS. We got the NLCS starting up here. There's a lot of fun going around in playoff baseball, but we want to start off with the top story. The news just broke a little bit a while ago today on Monday that Kim Ng is going to decline her option to return as the Marlins GM. So, Jon, what more do you have to say about this story with the now former Marlins GM?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit surprising they weren't able to work it out. I mean, clearly the Marlins wanted to bring her back. They were willing to pick up their end of the option. She did not pick up her end, and now they have parted ways. So, I mean, I think she's going to be a candidate in other places. She certainly did a very good job with the Marlins. They made the playoffs. Nobody expected that. Obviously, she found a good manager in Skip Schumacher. Made some good moves at the deadline, certainly with Berger and Bell at the corners of the infield. And, I think she's probably going to be a hot commodity on the market. Certainly the Red Sox, we know they've had trouble finding the right outside candidate for their top baseball job. And you would think, and I'm just speculating here, and I know a lot of people around baseball are doing the same sort of speculation, that she could be a fit for the Red Sox.
That's interesting because, like you said, obviously there is that vacancy, and she did a pretty good job with the Marlins, with all things being considered, in a franchise that really just hasn't had much success lately, and you were able to see them get in the playoffs. So it's another candidate out there, and like you said, the Red Sox will be an interesting spot there. But Jon, let's go to our next topic here and talk about the New York Yankees. They obviously had a lot of meetings this past week. We heard sound from Hal Steinbrenner talking about those meetings. There were some contentious parts in those meetings. Obviously, they had the outside audit team look at their analytics department. You have their top two stars and Garrett Cole and Aaron Judge meet with the owner and give their opinions on how their changes should be made. So there's a lot there, Jon. And then on top of that, we see Bryce Harper and the Phillies have an awesome series, and Yankees fans kind of wonder what could have been, right? So,
yeah,
just to summarize this Yankees thing right now, Jon, where do you see this going right now? There's a lot of self-reflection on where these moves have gone wrong, and we've talked about them on these trades that they've made and the signings that they've gone for. They just haven't worked out.
Yeah, I know. I feel like I'm being redundant here and ripping the Yankees every week here on this show, but it's been some kind of season. Now it's an unbelievable offseason in terms of all of these ex-Yankees or guys that they passed on who were never Yankees having great postseasons. I mean, Corey Seager's the guy they didn't really consider either. He's been incredible with Texas. Obviously, Jordan Montgomery was a guy that they traded thinking that, he probably wasn't going to be good enough to pitch in the playoffs for them. Well, here he goes and beats Houston, throws 6 1/3 shutout innings against a team the Yankees never beat in the postseason. So that one really looked bad. And of course, I'm here in Philadelphia, and Bryce Harper has been incredible. One of the best postseason performers ever, is having an amazing postseason with a 1380 OPS. Obviously, Castellanos and Turner are doing great as well. Can't blame them for those two. They were really not candidates for the Yankees at the moment. They were free agents. Yankees can't sign everybody. We get that, but it just seems to be quite a postseason where all the guys many of the guys that they either traded away or didn't sign are really huge contributors for their teams. And, I think it's great what the Yankees are doing, looking at what's gone wrong. They've certainly been in a slump in terms of their trades and acquisitions over the past few years. And they really need to take a cold, hard look at it. And we heard they had a contentious meeting down in Tampa with a lot of discussion. And, that's only positive. I think that they're really looking at things very hard and hopefully are being very honest about what went wrong, because certainly while they've had winning seasons every year, their moves have not been good over the last 3 years.
No, they haven't. And specifically, obviously, the offensive side, that's where it's been really bad for the Yankees this past year and the season before. So when you're looking at them in this offseason, is it just going to be, let's attack this offense, let's get some left-handed bats to balance the lineup a little bit more? And if so, who are some of those names you could see them going after?
Well, they need left-handed bats, and they need guys who have pretty good contact rates, because right now they've gone for that analytics really 100%. It feels like, I know they'll say they've always gone for a balance, but that's really not what you hear. And they've emphasized launch angle and hard hit rate, and really the result of that, I think it was a 226 batting average for the season, which is incredibly low historically for the Yankees or for anybody else, and really was only better than the A's this year. So they need guys who can hit, and they need guys who are left-handed. The most obvious guy is Cody Bellinger. We know his dad was Clay Bellinger, was a utility player for the Yankees. He wasn't an impact player, but he was a good luck charm. They did get to the World Series every year and win the World Series every year he was there. Cody Bellinger really reverted to his old MVP type form. He won't win the MVP in the National League, but he'll get a lot of votes in the top 10. And he had a great year. He's a versatile player, certainly center fielder first. And, obviously Dominguez looked very good when he came up for that cameo before he got hurt. But he could easily be a corner outfielder. So, Cody Bellinger is the guy that most obviously fits. There are other guys who could fit. I've seen that Kiermaier is a possibility, somebody who could fit. That, I think, is if you don't get Bellinger. And I do think generally they need some high average guys. You would think LeMahieu would be that guy, but perhaps a Whit Merrifield or somebody else is out there who's a free agent who can provide a good batting average, because I think they got the idea that home runs win games, and it's very hard to string 3 singles in today's day and age with the pitchers as good as they are. But it feels like the teams with the high batting averages, other than Boston, all the teams with the very high batting averages all had winning seasons.
Yeah, no, you speak at a really good point there about the high batting average and how it really is. That's the part of the balance, right? You're not going full power. You're going for both that complement of average and power.
And lefties, like you said.
And lefties.
They need to balance
right?
that.
Imagine you could have had that guy named, like we talked about, Bryce Harper, lefty, contact bat. He seems
good
like
lefty. He grew up a Yankee fan. His dad was a big Yankee fan. He wore 34 with the Nats. 3 and 4 is Mickey Mantle's number 7. That's the way he explained it. So take him at his word. He was a Yankee fan. At that time, they'd already signed Stan, and we can go on for many, many words about whether they should have signed Stan, but they already had Stanton.
Traded for Stan.
They already had Judge. So it was a tight squeeze. I know that his agent, Scott Boras, tried to sell him on that Bryce could play first base as well, maybe left field, whatever. He is now playing first base.
Right.
That's just a coincidence, but it's a left-handed bat. Would have been great for Yankee Stadium, and obviously a great big market performer. They're so into analytics, and analytics really doesn't show you who can perform in a big spot and who can perform in New York. I mean, Joey Gallo looked great in Texas. If you look at the analytics, right? I mean, he had very high WAR every year. Bryce Harper's WAR was only 1.8 in his free agent year. And I think a lot of teams, not just the Yankees, looked at that and said, is he worth the biggest contract in baseball with a 1.8 WAR? And he did not have good defensive metrics the previous year in right field. And I don't really trust the defensive metrics anyway.
Right.
But, he's fine in the outfield. He's obviously got a good arm. He's got good speed. But he's built for New York. He loves the limelight. He liked the idea of coming to New York. He's left-handed, and they did talk. They did talk. I don't believe they did meet, but they talked. And basically, that the sales pitch did not work, and they decided not to sign him. At this point, you could say, well, they shouldn't have ever signed Stanton, but we won't get into that at this moment.
Right.
That's an issue for another day.
It's an issue for
another day. There was a way to fit all 3 guys on the roster if you really were sold on Harper, and they obviously were not.
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, Bryce, it seems like that guy also that the Yankees were going for with Josh Donaldson trade, in that he was that clubhouse, kind of like that FU mentality. Like, we're going to be, like that's what Cashman had talked about as well. And obviously talking about his MVP form and Josh Donaldson, like that's the type of player we're getting in this clubhouse.
Energetic guy.
Right.
doesn't. I like Donaldson, but he does not have the baggage that
Yeah.
Donaldson had. So different, little bit different. But when Philly was considering Machado and Harper, they understood that Harper was a better fit for Philly with their gritty fans and their intense fans. Machado plays every day. I'm not going to criticize him or
No.
anything, but he's mild off the field. He's not a rah-rah guy like Harper, who really fits Philly. I mean, he is a perfect fit in Philly, but you know what? He would have been a pretty good fit in New York too.
It's a great way to put it, John. Speaking of other New York teams, let's talk about the New York Mets. We've talked about this a lot with Pete Alonso, but there is obviously that interest of where is this contract situation going to develop? Obviously, Pete is going into his last year of his current deal before he hits free agency, and the Mets have a new president in David Stearns. This is a big market team. You're talking about the richest owner in baseball. Can they get this deal done with Pete Alonso, John?
Yeah, I don't think that there's any momentum at the moment. So this winter is going to be difficult. I mean, obviously he hired Scott Boras, who's obviously the agent also for Harper. And right now it doesn't feel like they're on the same page. I think the Mets, understandably, were looking at that Freddie Freeman contract, who signed for $162 million over 6 years, and also that it does have deferrals in it, so the contract is probably worth $140 million, $145 million. But I think the Mets were willing to pay over the $140, $145 million, willing to pay him kind of a comparable contract to Freddie Freeman, who's won an MVP. We all love Pete. Pete's fantastic, homegrown, great in the clubhouse, big slugger. Freddie Freeman's probably the best pure hitter in baseball. So, it was logical the Mets were looking at that area, but right now, Pete's a year away from free agency. He doesn't want to use Freddie Freeman as a comp. I think some people will look at that as an under-market contract. He probably now with Boras, who had signed Teixeira for $180 million 14 years ago, and Prince Fielder for $214 million over 10 years ago. I think that the numbers are changing, and it's going to be difficult to do it probably anytime soon, and maybe even this winter. So they may have to wait till he's a free agent. Look, even if he's a free agent next year, Steve Cohen's still the Mets owner. Mets still have an excellent chance. It reminds me a little bit of Bernie Williams. Wasn't the, interest at that moment, I don't recall a year away that Bernie Williams was drawing this kind of interest about will he be signed or not signed, as Pete Alonso is, but Bernie Williams was already a champion by this point, 1998. The Yankees were unable to sign him. I think they'd offered him like $34 million. Eventually, in the winter, they'd upped it to $60 million. Eventually, when they heard Boston was willing to go to 88.5, they upped it to 87.5. Got it done. Seemed like a coup for Bernie Williams, who again was Boras's agent too at that time, but turned out to be one of the best contracts the Yankees ever did, and they won multiple more championships after that year, 99, 2000. So, it worked out for the Yankees. They paid what they thought was over market at that moment, but turned out to be a great deal. And I vision that the Mets will have a good chance to sign Pete, but probably as a free agent after the year, more likely.
Yeah, it kind of feels a little reminiscent of the Brandon Nimmo situation last year as well. He's going to go into free agency, but at the end of the day, Steve Cohen opened up his wallet, and credit to him, and he paid Brandon Nimmo a good contract and brought him back as a free agent. So
right, and he got 100. I think he got the same 162 million. That seems to be a magic number. So obviously, Pete's not going to sign for 162 million. If Nimmo's a fine player, but he's not Pete. Pete is that rare slugger and has the most home runs since he came up. In fact, in his first 5 years, he has the third most homers in history behind Mets announcer Ralph Kiner and future Hall of Famer Kiner is too, Albert Pujols. So he's going to do better than that. He's not going to get a Freeman deal. He's not going to get the Nimmo deal. He's going to do better, but probably later on. Probably not this winter, at least not immediately.
Homegrown player, hits almost 50 home runs every year. It's hard to find that type of production in baseball, especially for a first baseman, unless you're Matt Olson in the Braves. Speaking of which, the Braves got eliminated, John. Now we're in the ALCS and LCS. We started off the show talking about that. Let's talk about the playoffs now. You talked about the Phillies. Give you credit for here. You talked about the Phillies. This is going to be a tough matchup. You wouldn't want to play the Phillies, and Bryce Harper and the Phillies looked good, and they beat up on the Braves. So, John, looking at the ALCS, NLCS right now, how do you see this playing out right now? Obviously, that we said the Rangers took game one last night, but how do you see both these series playing out?
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I'm making a little comeback from my original Padres Angels prediction. And at the beginning of these playoffs, I think I'm just going for my own convenience. I don't know because obviously if it was San Diego and Anaheim, they'd be very close. And I went with Baltimore and Philly at the beginning, and that would be very, very convenient as well for me. So maybe that was in the back of my mind. I don't know, but I did like Philly a lot, and they did upset, if you want to call it that, the Braves once again. 14 fewer victories, I believe, in the regular season, just like last year. And again, they beat them. I'm here in Philly, so maybe I'm caught up in the excitement. To me, it feels like they're going to get to the World Series.
Yeah.
Obviously, Arizona, give them credit. Nobody saw this. They've been amazing. I don't know whether the Dodgers were sleeping or what, but they were terrible. And Arizona just crushed them. So I don't think we should overlook Arizona.
No.
You never know. But right now, I'm in Philly. They have the loudest fans and a lot of excitement. And we talked about Harper, but I mean, Turner was a great free agent signing. Castellanos, unbelievable free agents. I mean, they are one team that really has hit the jackpot in free agency. I brought this up to the owner on the field yesterday, John Middleton, and he basically said, "Oh, we're lucky or fortunate." He was being modest. They basically gotten them all right. I think Jake Arrieta was the last big free agent they signed that really didn't have a big impact for the Phillies. But I mean, Castellanos, Turner, Harper, you can build your team.
JT Realmuto.
Free agency, yeah, Realmuto as well. He came originally in a trade, but you're right, he was a free agent. Mets tried to sign him. I think they actually offered him a pretty good offer, and it was early in the offseason. They wanted an answer quickly. He didn't give it to him quickly, and they went on and signed someone who didn't work out. Now with the Orioles, but Realmuto, another guy that they did sign first via trade, then free agency. So I mean, they're basically batting 1,000 in free agency, and just a lot of excitement around here now. As part of that is the fans. This is a crazy, crazy sports town. I've heard it's a football town or a hockey town or whatever, but it's certainly a baseball town as well.
No, the atmosphere has been awesome in Philly. The fans are crazy, like you said, and they show up for their team, and it's been a fun postseason to watch in Philly. And real quick on the ALCS, obviously, like we talked about, Rangers take game one, but you saw Max Scherzer. He's been activated for the ALCS. Verlander pitched. But I mean, it feels like the Rangers kind of built this momentum here in the playoffs as well. Kind of like the Phillies. They didn't look great towards the end of the year, but all of a sudden they're getting the Evan Carter. I mean, talk about him. I mean, it's been a great postseason for the Texas Rangers as well. And Bruce Bochy going around with this team again.
Yeah, I mean, Bochy, it never seems to lose. And I mentioned that on Twitter, and then people pointed out that his regular season record is actually a losing record. But I mean, look at the guy. He's won 3 World Series with teams that weren't expected to win the World Series. I mean, Texas is very good. I'm not sure they were the favorite coming in. I don't think so. Probably, certainly, it's hard to remember now, but the Braves and the Dodgers were probably the favorites. But even the American League, you had teams that certainly won more games than Texas, and you're right, they were not very good at the end of the year, and that probably shouldn't matter. Arizona was not very good at the end of the year either, and they've been incredible so far in the postseason. Right now it feels like Texas has the momentum. You never can count Houston out. We've seen this too much in New York, and nationally they're really terrific. Have a great nucleus with Altuve and Yordan Alvarez, but it feels like Texas has the momentum, and it's just another series where an ex-Yankee or a Yankee they passed, or a guy they passed on for the Yankees, performing with Montgomery throwing that shutout in game one. I think Joe wrote that
he did
trolling the Yankees.
He did.
I think that's a good way to put it. It's been a tough postseason for the Yankees as well as a tough season. But I'll say this for the Yankees: 82-80. If that's a disaster, and it is, I think Cashman was correct with that. Yankee fans should feel good about that, at least, that 82-80 is considered a disaster around here.
Right. It's just a matter of $272 million doesn't work out as a playoff team for a payroll. And like you said, this
they're not the only ones.
I know.
San Diego was right there. The Mets were over them. So The money doesn't buy everything. It did for Philly.
Did
If
for
you do
Philly.
it right, Philly did well.
Texas.
did
Yep.
great with their free agent signings with Seager, with Semien. You know, they made a lot of good ones. Obviously, DeGrom hasn't worked out to this point, but yeah, it's funny how many ex-Yankees and ex-Mets are playing so prominently here in this postseason. Mets don't have as much regret though.
No.
Those trades for Verlander, who pitched last night, and Scherzer, I think, were the right thing to do, and I think they got good prospects back.
100%.
Yankees a little more to regret, which is why they had those contentious meetings in Tampa.
Jon, there's a lot more to develop here in the offseason, but we're going to enjoy the postseason the rest of the way. Hope you enjoy the game tonight, obviously, with the Phillies. Appreciate you as always, man.
All right, great talking to you. See you later.